Tonight, the Ukrainian fortress city is being hammered by Russia in Putin's pursuit of a grand prize in his war. Ukraine has spent years defending Donbas, but people there fear this onslaught is the beginning of the end. Ukraine's attacks on Russia are also hitting home, though, with Vladimir Putin demanding a bigger response. Where does it leave hopes for peace in a war that's raged on while attention has been drawn to Iran? Also ahead, addressing a climate crisis as Europe swelters in dangerous heat, UN chief evokes the work of one of Britain's greatest novelists.
Crisis brings clarity. And here in London, the city of Dickens, it is clear that our world is facing a tale of two crises.
Breaking Afghans' connections to the outside world, why the Taliban is coming for people's smartphones. Also tonight, Gary Lineker's World Cup take on politics on the pitch and the hostile reception for Iran's players.
I do think that they've been unfairly treated, but they've shown great spirit on the pitch, and that's important for them.
Good evening and welcome to The World. I'm Yalda Hakim, live here from New York. When the Trump administration pressured Ukraine to give Donbas to Russia as part of peace negotiations, the Ukrainians balked at the idea. And as Sky News saw in a secret underground base, specialist Ukrainian forces were among extra deployments to the eastern region last year to combat Russian advances. But while President Zelensky has been on the world stage talking up battlefield success elsewhere, Russian bombs and soldiers have been grinding away at Donbas and its cities. While in Moscow, Vladimir Putin has ordered the government to step up countermeasures against Ukrainian drones hitting deeper into Russia, which he says are a Ukrainian ploy to appear on the front foot. Just have a listen.
This is being done with a single goal, to create favorable conditions for the eventuality of peace talks beginning, or more accurately, resuming, after being interrupted at Ukraine's initiative to create the so-called position of strength. But what position of strength? It can only be a matter of creating the impression of such a position, because the reality on the battlefield looks completely different.
Well, shortly, I'll speak to the Ukrainian MP Lisa Yasco. First, our military analyst Sean Bell looks at whether Russia getting closer to achieving one of its biggest objectives in the war, full control of the Donbas region. Have a look.
So the world has been somewhat distracted by the Iran war these last few months. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been continuing apace. Is Russia actually on the verge of a strategic breakthrough? Well, many of the world's media have been suggesting over the last couple of months that Ukraine appears to be on the front foot in its battle. Not only has it taken more territory than it ceded, also Russian casualties seem to be greater than their ability to recruit. As a result of all of that, President Putin will be angry. He will be determined to inflict his own control over the conflict, and there have been widespread suggestions that he will mount some form of summer offensive. It appears now that offensive is in the Donbas, in this one area that he hasn't yet seized. And Kostiantynivka, of course, is the first of those fortress cities. But why are these fortress cities so important to President Putin and Zelensky? Well, the key is that if those were to fall, it provides a gateway for Russian forces to go into central Ukraine, and therefore they would not be stopped. They'd take a lot more territory. As a result of which, even though President Putin has suggested that if Ukraine was to give those up, what might bring an end to the war, President Zelensky can't do that. He can't hand the keys to central Ukraine back to President Putin. So the Russian strategy at the moment for these attacks appears to be to actually try to encircle Kostiantynivka. Once it's done that, it can then mount assaults further north and try and take out the rest of the fortress cities. And that will be incredibly slow, incredibly costly, and, of course, highly attritional. And if you look at a time-lapse of the Russian forces as they've advanced since the start of the year, we can see it's incredibly slow, that they've been held back in their assault. And it's literally only by the time you get to June that all of a sudden the Russian forces have finally managed to go and extend their grip around the outside of Kostiantynivka. But, of course, that does not mean the city is going to fall anytime soon. And the other issue here is that's clearly the main effort for Russian forces. If that's the case, then clearly Russia will have pulled forces from elsewhere around the country to focus on that. That will leave other areas vulnerable, and that's something that Ukraine will be able to capitalise upon. But what is going to be the Ukraine strategy here? Well, the first thing they have to do is not get dragged into a war of attrition with Russia. Russia is the bigger force. That will be very difficult for them to win. The three priorities seem to be they've got to address Russia's advances in Kostiantynivka. They're probably not going to be able to withstand that onslaught. What they need to do is make Russia pay a huge price for every step they take. The second one is to stop Russia's ability to fund the war. That means targeting their energy infrastructure. Ukraine has been developing its long-range and medium-range weapons, which have been very effective at starting to strike that and have an impact on Russia's oil exports. And finally, to threaten Crimea. Why is that important? It has historical significance for President Putin. He will not want to lose that. So where does this leave us? Well, there's no doubt that Russia is piling pressure onto the front line, but actually Ukraine so far seems to be withstanding that. The key will be this summer, is Russia able to deliver strategic gains over the summer? If it's not, there'll be some difficult questions for President Putin to answer in the winter. Meanwhile, for Ukraine, very much like Iran, it looks unlikely they're going to win this war, but actually, as long as they avoid losing it, that will be considered strategic success.
There. Well, let's go to Lisa Yasco. She's a Ukrainian MP with President Zelensky's party and member of the Ukrainian delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Thank you so much, Ms. Yasco, for joining us here on the programme. The Donbas has been a huge prize for the Russians. They've wanted it for the last 4 years. They're pushing, they're trying to advance. Who controls Kostiantynivka at the moment?
Well, this is a very hard question because we know that Russians are always wanting to control not only Konstantinovka, but also other villages and cities around and the whole Donbas. And they're trying to sell the idea that they're controlling all of that to all the world. But our Ukrainian army is actually also holding very, very strong. But unfortunately, of course, within Donbas, we have a lot of very, very strong fights that are going on right now and for the last years. And Russians just keep pushing more and more.
Yeah, they do seem to be doubling down and focusing now as part of their strategy. And we've heard Vladimir Putin say that he wants things to move harder and faster. Does that concern you in Kyiv?
Well, it concerns us a lot every day because Kyiv is bombed every second day. Other cities are bombed massively. We do have such massive bombings from time to time, but only recently, in the recent months, I would say the scale became so massive with so different types of weapons that it wasn't like this before. And I personally can say that me and many other people, we actually started going to the shelters more than we did before, just because your instincts are working. And when you wake up in the middle of the night from such explosions, you just cannot stay in your bed anymore.
In terms of the Donbas, I spoke to President Zelensky a couple of weeks ago when he came to London, and we talked about the Donbas. We talked about the fact that, you know, it's something that the Russians are firm about when they say that they want it as part of any peace deal. At the time, President Zelensky said that it was not something that he was willing to compromise. But do you think the Ukrainian position will ultimately have to shift?
No, there could be no compromises on the question of the territory. This is the price that we paid of losing so many lives. And we are at the moment when we understand that our technological advancements and that we manage actually to reduce Russian capacity to have this war. And we need to continue that, because if we don't stop it, then they will attack in 1 month's time, in 2 months' time. Any kind of ceasefire deal will not work. We don't believe in that if we don't finish Russian ability to actually to have the full-scale invasion and aggression again.
And if you don't have a choice, given how quickly they're now pushing in some parts of the Donbas?
Well, it's not going to be decisive or overall, even if they take more villages and more territory. The information that we currently have that Russia is actually not advancing so much. Yes, they use other types of advancements, such as psychological terror, massive attacks, destroying civilian infrastructure, energy infrastructure, water infrastructure. They're very capable of that. But we have no illusions, and we know that they will continue doing that. And we have to continue. What we have to do is to defend ourselves and to strike inside Russia.
And you have been striking deep inside Russia. They've been feeling it in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, many of the major cities now. And it is something I spoke with President Zelensky about. Are you concerned that the Russians are learning and emulating the sort of drone advancement that Ukraine has managed to develop over the course of this war?
You always have to understand that your enemy is always learning, especially Russians are very smart. They're capable of learning. They have a lot of money. They have a lot of resources. And that's why we all, as international community, we need to work to reduce that resources, financial resources, energy resources, the military resources inside Russia. And it is possible if we trade less or we have no trade with Russia, if we have more sanctions on Russia, everything is possible.
Lisa Yasco, thank you so much for joining us here on the program.
Thank you.
Well, the US and Donald Trump in particular have appeared less interested in resolving the war in Ukraine, as focus and efforts have been drawn to Iran. Success in those negotiations hinges on what happens in the parallel war between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Sky's Ivor Bennett has been in a Hezbollah neighborhood of Beirut and explains how easily the latest ceasefire could fall apart. Just have a look.
So this is Iran's red line in their peace talks with the US. Israeli strikes on Beirut and southern Lebanon. This is one of several sites that have been hit in recent weeks in the southern suburb of Dahir, a Hezbollah stronghold. And you can see here half the building was literally flattened. There is a mountain of rubble here, twisted metal cables everywhere. The remaining floors are kind of just hanging on there. And beyond me, just over here, have a look at this. There's a massive crater, just shows the scale of the impact of the strike here. And amongst the rubble, you can see all sorts of kind of everyday belongings. There's a carpet here, there's a book over there, kids' toys and clothing. This is people's homes just completely wiped out. And Iran has said, no more of this. This is their red line. The whole peace deal with the US rides on this.
As far as you are weak, there is no peace. If you are strong, peace will be happen. We have to be very strong in Lebanon. We have to stand up for our rights. We have to say no for Israel. America has to say no for Israel, and then things could be happen in the future.
It's our land, and we are fighting them in our land. Go to your land, leave us alone. We will leave you alone. You stay there, and we will stay here. That's it. It's enough.
Now, despite all this, there is cautious optimism, I think, on both sides about the general direction of travel towards this wider peace deal, because supposedly they made progress on three key issues. Firstly, on the situation here in Lebanon, J.D. Vance, US Vice President, he said that both sides have created a deconfliction cell, which I think is a fancy way of saying monitoring group, to try to ensure the ceasefire here holds. Number two, Iran's nuclear program. According to the White House, Iran has agreed to allow independent inspectors back into the country. That would be the first time since last year, more than a year, although there's some dispute over whether or not that is indeed the case. And thirdly, the Strait of Hormuz. Both sides have said they will create a mechanism to keep the waterway open and to ensure safe passage for ships and tankers through the mines. So there is progress, but it remains very, very precarious indeed.
Ivor Bennett reporting there from Beirut. Now, with hostilities on hold between the US and Iran, neighbouring Qatar is working to restart operations at a sprawling energy facility targeted by Iran early in the war. A huge explosion at the Ras Laffan industrial complex on Sunday night, blamed on a technical fault, killed 13 people and injured almost 70 others. The blast was felt in Qatar's capital, Doha, more than 40 miles away. The satellite image on the left shows the site before the explosion. On the left, taken days later, you can see the area blackened by fire. Now, the UN Shipping Agency says it started an evacuation plan for 11,000 crew members who've been stranded aboard tankers and ships for months in the Strait of Hormuz. It'll be gradual to avoid collisions in the crowded waters. Shortly, we'll speak to the head of the UN Shipping Agency. That's coming up in a moment. Also coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Red alerts for extreme heat. Europe swelters through an early summer scorcher.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They will be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Now, England are currently facing Ghana in the World Cup, and ahead of the match, I spoke to former England footballer Gary Lineker. He told me about his concerns surrounding the tournament, including a Somali referee having his visa denied and the treatment of the Iranian team. But he said the joy of the event had been the fans, with the Tartan Army winning the fun game. Let's just have a listen.
I think football-wise, it's been fabulous, which is the most important thing. With all World Cups, there are the things that will occur, and it's a big event. Disappointing things, probably the difficulties that some teams have had with visas, etc. The Iran team not being allowed to stay in America and having to basically commute from Mexico. Obviously, the referee not being allowed in. Things like that. Bit disappointing. Ticket pricing, I think, even though FIFA will try and justify it by saying the stadiums are full, which they really do appear to be, and the atmosphere is fabulous, the stadiums have been brilliant, but I think the joy of the World Cup is all the fans being able to go to football matches. Now, somehow they're finding a way. FIFA say, well, all the money or the revenue goes back into the sport. Well, whether that's the case or not, I don't think they can justify the ticket pricing that's big. People shouldn't have to take a second mortgage or sell their car to try and go and watch a football match. So, having said that, I think the absolute joy of this tournament has been the fans. And I think they can teach us so much, the harmony. Everyone just wants to get on, and I think it's a message in life. And we talk about, you know, politics is not entering football, but I think politics can learn from football, because we've seen, you know, I've sat there at Times Square, and I've sat and watched day after day. I just stand at the window and watch different fans all getting together, all harmonious, and it's joyous. And I think maybe football will save the world.
Maybe. You know, but you've said this as well before, that ahead of any of these sorts of major sporting events, whether it was Qatar or other World Cups, there is a lot of politics beforehand in the lead up to. But this is the first time that we've seen the host nation recently at war with one of the nations participating. We've seen referees, family members, players not getting visas, not able to come. Do you think there has been a level of double standards in terms of how we've covered this from the media and others, and how previous World Cups, like the one in Qatar, was covered?
Well, I don't know. I think a lot of people have voiced their concerns. We certainly have, and consistently so. I think I remember we did the same in Russia. We were, you know, it's 4 years after they'd invaded Crimea. You can talk about Qatar as well, and LGBTQ rights, etc. And this one the same. And then once the football starts, we tend to focus on the football. So I think there's been a lot of people speaking up about this in just the same way as other tournaments. No country's perfect, we know that. Everyone's got their faults, and that's highlighted before the start of the tournament. But the refreshing thing is that, for me, because I love my sport, I love football, the games have been really entertaining. The fan element that I talked about before has been fabulous. So, you know, there's always going to be issues, but I think most people now are just focused on the actual football, and that's a good thing. But I don't think there have been double standards in terms of the critique of things that have happened here. I don't think there's been much difference from other World Cups.
The Iranian coach said that they are the most oppressed. Do you think they've been treated quite badly?
I think they've been treated very unfairly. I did say I mean, I've covered a lot of World Cups, everyone either playing or broadcasting since 1986, and I can't remember going into a tournament where the host nation is at war with one of the competing nations. So that was a first. Well, you know, hopefully the peace deal holds, and perhaps because of the peace deal, it might be a nice gesture if they allow Iran to stay in the country where their football matches are. So that, I do think that they've been unfairly treated, but they've shown great spirit on the pitch, and that's important for them.
How do you think England are faring? Because, of course, they're going to be playing Ghana tonight in Boston.
Well, cracking start. really entertaining game, front foot football, the way I want to see England play. We were playing to our strengths, particularly in the second half. Trying not to get too encouraged because I've got a lot of experience of being disappointed like every other English fan, but we've been knocking on the door in recent tournaments and getting close, and if you keep knocking, eventually, hopefully, one alone. Just hope it happens before I pop my clogs.
And the Tartan Army, they've been doing well as well. I was in Boston, and they'd basically taken over the entire city.
Yeah. I think they might have won the fan game.
They certainly sang the loudest anthem. I think they broke the record.
The Flower of Scotland is amazing. It gives you goosebumps when you hear it. I think probably the stars of the tournament in terms of the fans are the Scots, and you have to say the Norwegians with the. Oof. I think that we saw them out here. They were right on the steps there. Like, thousands of them doing it the other night. It was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, fan-wise, Scotland doing great. Got a tough game tomorrow against Brazil. Even if they only lose by 1, they should probably get through. But fingers crossed, because we don't want them to go home.
No. Harry Kane on the verge of breaking your England goals record. Got mixed feelings about that?
No, not at all. Just really hope he blitzes it and goes. I mean, all records will be broken now because they've obviously changed the format of the World Cup, and there's, let's say, not as strong nations in it at times, so there'll be lots more goals scored. So we've seen Messi, we've seen Harry Kane, we've seen Erling Haaland and Kylian Mbappe all banging in the goals. So that's to be expected. It's a nice reminder to people. Everyone sees a graphic. It's a little reminder that I used to play the game reasonably well. So no, I just want Harry to go blast away, score loads of goals, and because we'll need that if we're going to win the tournament. And I think he's the best English striker we've ever had. We
saw you on ITV the other night. How was that?
That was fun. It was fun. Well, I'm an ITV person now. I've got a new show coming out called The Box, and obviously I'm here with Netflix, and we're doing this daily show here, which is so much fun. Glad you could come onto the set and see it. But going on to ITV was just, I thought, a bit of fun, and also I could to promote The Box and this show as well. So it was lovely to see a few people like Ian Wright.
I mean, odd for a lot of people who so used to seeing you on the BBC.
That's all right. I've worked for lots of channels over the years, and it was nice to do it. And I mean, they're here just over in Brooklyn, so it wasn't that far to go. It would have been difficult to do it for the Beeb in Salford. It would have been a long trip there and back.
Are you keeping an eye on what's going on back home? Because we've got our 7th Prime Minister in 10
I did
years.
notice. I did notice, yeah.
A bit of a mess.
I mean, so to me it seems ever since Brexit, with I don't know how many prime ministers we've gone through since then, but yeah, I mean, obviously difficult for him, difficult for the Labour Party. It looks like, well, we're going to get a new prime minister. I suspect it might be Andy Burnham. I've met Andy a few times. Hopefully he'll go in there and try and galvanise our politics, and I think certain things we're improving on and stuff, but I think overall probably needed a change. But you can't just keep changing. Eventually you run out of substitutes.
Was Gary Lineker speaking to me a little earlier. Well, since that interview took place, the US has announced it's easing restrictions on the Iranian team, slightly allowing the squad to travel to the country 2 days before their next match instead of 1. Returning to the plans by the UN shipping agency to start an evacuation plan for 11,000 crew members who've been stranded aboard tankers and ships for months in the Strait of Hormuz. It'll be gradual to avoid collisions in the crowded waters. Well, joining me now is Arsenio Dominguez, Secretary General of the UN International Maritime Organization. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us here on the program. I mean, this has been something that is been deeply concerning for the seafarers who've been stranded there, thousands of them, their families, their employers. I mean, I've been speaking to some of them over the course of the last few months. So this must be a slight relief, even though, there is still so much uncertainty.
Absolutely, and I'm grateful that you have kept the seafarers on top of all these conversations that went in your programs. But for us, it's a great step forward to actually now have that agreement with Oman to use the corridor closest to the territorial waters in order to start in a very organized way the evacuation of all these over 500 vessels in the innocent seafarers. We're counting around 11,000 seafarers that need to be evacuated. So in the next few days, we will see an increase of the transit because we also have, of course, the corridor that Iran has established. And in this way, step by step, we will not only be able to evacuate these innocent seafarers, but then the next step will be to start the resumption of trade into the region.
Yeah, talk us through the evacuation of these 11,000 seafarers, because it is going to be a monumental task and just some of the challenges that you'll face.
I mean, what we're doing is basically working very much with all the countries in the region in order to bring the vessels to the locations where they need to be and then contact the Omani authorities and then have a coordinated approach. Since last Friday, we've seen an increase of around 30 vessels that have been transiting the strait every day. With this corridor with Oman, of course, we will see an increase of the vessels that will give us a few weeks to start evacuating those over 500 vessels. In the meantime, the traffic separation scheme that usually is the one utilized for the transit in the Strait of Hormuz, in accordance to the agreement signed between Iran and the United States, will be clean and demined, and that would allow us, again, to further increase the transit and, of course, step by step, bringing shipping into the way that it was operating before the conflict started.
There is a level of risk, though, because we know how fragile this deal is, and even, you know, though the 60 days has begun, there is a lot of uncertainty, unpredictability around this.
Yes, it's important to focus on the positives. The parties are engaging. We've been very much involved in everything related to shipping in the region. So right now, we've seen that the guarantees, the safety guarantees are there in order to start this evacuation, which is, of course, has been paramount for IMO from the very beginning. And then we will continue the conversations into other different topics, how we actually have the securities of demining the area. There's other countries that are very much engaged with us as well. For example, the coalition led by the United Kingdom and France, and they're ready to provide any assets that can assist in bringing those guarantees. So step by step, as much as we continue all these conversations, we'll focus on the progress that we can take and keep positive that we can actually resume trade into the Strait of Hormuz for the benefit of not only the innocent seafarers, but everyone around the world.
Tell us how the seafarers are doing, because I spoke to a captain a little while ago, perhaps a month or so ago, and he talked about the level of stress and strain, the impact on the mental health of his crews, given, you know, many of them, some of them expected to sort of, you know, be just going through and going home, and they ended up stuck for 4 months.
That's correct. And this is where the unsung heroes that the seafarers are. Many people don't realize the stress that they have gone through for only doing their jobs. The companies have been good and the ship owners have been good in providing support to them and giving information to their families as well. There's been a lot of camaraderie that I have heard from several seafarers in how they're actually supporting each other there. Now, the next step for us, and this is where we're working with several non-governmental organizations that focus in supporting the seafarers, is what happens next. Because, of course, we need to keep providing an assistance to them from mental health, fatigue, safety, and their well-being in general, in order to actually maintain and reintegrate them into the trade as much as possible and as soon as practically possible for them. So this is not just the evacuation right now. It's the work that we also need to do with the seafarers after, because they have suffered from this conflict. And, of course, we need to keep providing that assistance.
Yes, and of course, tragically, a number of them lost their lives as well.
Sadly, we have 14 seafarers that actually died when the vessels were attacked during this conflict. They play no part for it. And this is my message to everyone around the world, in particular the countries. Shipping should not be weaponized. Shipping is there to carry around 90% of goods for everyone around the world. We can be resilient. We can find new routes for operations. But the reality is that if we need to stay away from these kind of situations, from these conflict zones, it's only the countries in the region and the global population that will actually be affected. We've seen how prices go up, how there's shortages, and there could be further shortages when it comes to food security. So this is why we shouldn't use shipping as a weapon. We should all recognize its importance and the key role that the seafarers played as well.
Mr. Dominguez, really grateful for your time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme. Red alerts for extreme heat. Europe swelters through an early summer scorcher.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Millions of people across Europe are in the grip of an early summer heatwave, with red alerts issued or in place for France, Spain, Italy and the UK. This animation shows how temperatures climb through the day. The extreme conditions are coming from a high-pressure system that stalled over the continent, creating what's known as a heat dome. France recorded its hottest day ever with a national average of 29.8 degrees Celsius. Some areas saw well over 40. And the danger isn't just for heat stroke. Dozens of people have drowned since Thursday trying to find relief in waterways and beaches. Further south, Spain faced a heat wave across parts of the Iberian Peninsula. Temperatures even reached 40 degrees in the normally temperate regions along the country's northern Atlantic coast. In the UK, the worst of it is forecast for tomorrow and Thursday, when the Met Office red warnings will stretch from southern Wales across to Birmingham and down to London and Bath. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has been in London, coincidentally addressing a climate conference. Just have a listen.
Crisis brings clarity. And here in London, the city of Dickens, it is clear that our world is facing a tale of two crises. A climate crisis pushing us deeper toward higher temperature and closer to catastrophic tipping points, and an energy crisis exposing the folly of a world hooked on hydrocarbons. On the surface, these crises may seem separate, but they share the same destructive origin: fossil fuels.
As Antonio Guterres. Well, Dr. James Dyke is the Assistant Director of the Global Systems Institute at Exeter University. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. We're seeing red alerts in the UK, extreme heat across Europe. It just feels like every year it's getting hotter and hotter.
It is indeed, because every year concentrations of carbon dioxide increase in the atmosphere, and we are seeing more heat being trapped by those greenhouse gases, and temperatures are going to rise. And one way to think about that is that the extreme weather that we're experiencing now is the normal weather that we're going to experience in the future. So this summer is probably the mildest summer for many people who are going to be living the rest of their lives under a much warmer climate.
I mean, that's quite extraordinary, because I'm seeing reports that say perhaps in the next decade we could see, the weather reach beyond 45 degrees in the UK.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, I grew up in the 1970s and 1980s, and the prospects of summer temperatures reaching 30 degrees Celsius was quite exceptional then. Now we've already exceeded 40 degrees Celsius. And yes, if concentrations continue to rise, we would expect to see more of what is currently extreme weather. But it's going to become the norm if we don't rapidly phase out the burning of fossil fuels.
And how do people, equip themselves for this? Because, for example, a city like London just doesn't feel like, it can cope, and certainly not other parts of the UK, with the kind of extreme weather that you're talking about. I mean, we're not necessarily at the 45-degree mark yet, but, how does a country and a city prepare for those sorts of extreme conditions?
Yeah, we're not at 45 degrees yet, but we are already at dangerous climate change. So there will be some people who will lose their lives this week. The European heat wave last year is associated with something like 16,500 premature deaths. And those deaths were affecting maybe the elderly, maybe with people with underlying health conditions. But we are already in dangerous climate change, and we need to respond to that. We need to mitigate, we need to phase out fossil fuels, but we also need to adapt. And London is a good example, because London is a city that was built with houses that were designed to keep the heat in, and they are going to need to keep the heat out. The good news is none of this is rocket science. We know the technologies, we know the kind of infrastructure that we need to build, we know the kind of things we need to retrofit for those houses. So if we can do both, and there's no reasons why we can't, if we can rapidly phase out fossil fuels so we avoid the very worst of that extra heat that's going to be coming to us for the rest of the century, and also adapt, make sure we can cool our homes, make sure we have cooling centres, make sure that we can adapt our urban environments to take more advantage of passive cooling, such as trees. There's an awful lot that can be done. The fact that it hasn't doesn't mean that we shouldn't redouble our efforts in this area.
And it certainly feels like, for as long as I can remember, scientists have been warning about this. 10 years ago, they were talking about these sorts of record numbers. And when you talk about in 10 years' time, it's going to be even worse, even hotter. I guess the question is, are governments sitting up, listening, putting the measures in place that they need to?
Well, the short answer is they haven't. I remember 10 years ago giving an interview which sounds very similar to today's interview. It was extreme weather. It was associated with some quite extraordinary wildfires. And then the message was, we need to rapidly stop burning fossil fuels. We need to adapt to a much more warmer climate. And by and large, governments haven't listened. The 2015 Paris Agreement was the world's first international agreement on climate change, and that was a tremendous success. But we knew what we needed to do then. But unfortunately, the UK government, which has been leading the world in many respects, has still been kicking the can. It's still failed to make the, at times, yes, difficult decisions that we need to make in order to avoid what's going to be even worse conditions coming down the line.
Dr. Dykes, really grateful for your time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim, next up on the programme. Smashing smartphones in Afghanistan, the Taliban acts on orders from the Supreme Leader.
Liberation Day.
By popular demand, here we are.
Donald Trump. It is quite the story. Wherever it goes, on Trump 100, we go with it.
Can you tell us who you're looking for? Unbelievable we've come to this.
Are you overstating the reach and significance of this deal?
Not like you said it.
From the UK?
Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
It was 10 feet from him, and all of a sudden the shots rang out.
People impacted.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Join us wherever you get your podcast.
We've come to one of Moscow's Cold War bunkers. It was built as a top-secret command centre. Being here really feels like you're stepping back in time. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent. A show of military might and menace. Courage, bravery and sacrifice will win the day. It's a new subject. They'll learn about combat drones and some how to handle a Kalashnikov. The Kremlin continues to put forward its own version of events, both present and past.
There's no mention of the fact that Russia invaded its neighbour. That's rewriting history, isn't it?
Now we have to read it carefully.
Vladimir Putin put forward his plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine, telling Kiev, pull out of your eastern territories and the war will end. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Vladimir Putin is already the Kremlin's longest-serving leader since Stalin. The question is, what will a fifth Putin term mean for Russia and the world? Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I can't answer questions that stupid.
I've watched Vladimir Putin attempt to create a new world order. The St. Petersburg Economic Forum was the backdrop to Vladimir Putin's latest verbal volley that Russia could send missiles to other nations to target the West. Ambassador, I wonder, shall we have a quick word for Sky News? Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine?
Swedish media, oh my God, you're not afraid of being here.
American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. Russia says Evan Gershkovich was caught red-handed, but has never produced any evidence to back that up. Sky News, get the full story first.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist...
Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off. And make a statement.
What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
There are new worrying signs that the Taliban is attempting to cut Afghans off from the rest of the world. Government workers have been told they can no longer use smartphones, and the Taliban has been recorded smashing and destroying devices. It's not known what's brought about the ban, but it's been reported that officials want to prevent leaks and improve worker productivity. Last September and October, the internet was cut off nationwide before eventually being switched back on. Well, joining me now is Shahrazad Akbar, the Executive Director of Rawadari, an Afghan human rights organisation. Shahrazad John, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. I just want to begin by helping our audiences understand better what has actually happened, because we've seen these quite disturbing images emerging of the Taliban smashing phones. Just tell us who they're targeting and why you think they're doing it.
Thank you for having me, Yalda John. Well, yes, Taliban military personnel were told by the supreme leader that they could no longer use smartphones. Then it was communicated to civilian employees of the Taliban government as well that they are no longer allowed to use smartphones. Initially, we understood this to be a ban on the use of smartphones in the workplace because of fear of leaks. But later, it was communicated that they are not even allowed to use smartphones at home. And if anyone is caught using a smartphone at home, a government employee at home or in the office, that they will be punishable by imprisonment. So it's quite severe. It's quite frightening for anyone working for the Taliban government, because this is now considered a crime. And this, our understanding is that this is, well, for two reasons. One, to prevent leakages. A lot of information goes out from government offices still to human rights organizations, to Afghan media in exile who are quite active, reporting on Taliban's violations, as well as to Afghan media inside Afghanistan. That's one way that they stay in touch with Taliban government officials, is through social media channels like WhatsApp on daily contact. And the second is, the fear is that, is this the kind of foreshadowing a larger ban, a larger internet ban, or more restrictions on everyone's access to smartphones, which will have consequences for everyone, particularly for women, who this is the only way for them to stay connected to the world, to pursue an education, to do their advocacy. So there are concerns that, looking at Taliban policies and implementation in the past few years, we know that they start small. Sometimes they start from Kandahar, then it expands to other provinces. Or they start with one category, and then it expands to other categories as well. So they do this gradually. And the fear is, what if this is the case again?
Yes, because they tried this on a while ago when they cut the internet off. And frankly, for about 48 hours, Afghanistan was completely in darkness. You know, they were completely cut off from the outside world.
Absolutely. And it was a nightmare for organizations like us that receive all our documentation from networks and sources inside Afghanistan, as well as for those who are providing education, but also the Afghan diaspora and refugee community, which is a large community. And this is the only way of them staying connected with families. People are worried about their parents, elderly parents, family members. And it was extremely frightening. There was a pushback, internal pushback, we understood primarily from the business community, but also some of the Taliban ministers themselves, because of course, the internet is also a way for Taliban to communicate their own messages. They're very active on social media. They have real accounts of the spokespeople of the Taliban, but also in government officials, but also influencers that work with them, others that work with them and promote their propaganda. So we understood that this was part of the reasoning that sort of was put forward to Supreme Leader at that time. And a few scenarios was discussed with the Supreme Leader and its Taliban Supreme Leader and the Religious Council in Kandahar, and then the ban was lifted. But again, when this comes back in, you know, it's varying again. Would this lead to an internet ban? Are they looking at something like what was happening in Iran, where internet was only domestically available? Are they looking at kind of expanding the smartphone bans? They have before also spoken, religious leaders close to Taliban, saying it's not permissible for women to have smartphones because they will be looking at inappropriate material, or they will be, you know, more prone to talking to men who are not related to them. So will more come? That's the concern, and unfortunately, it's not unlikely.
The concern is The concern is that they're testing the waters. They're seeing what the reaction of perhaps a small group will be, and then they will attempt to expand it to the rest of the population.
Yes, absolutely. That's the concern. And if there is a strong response from particularly the private sector, but also individuals and institutions within the Taliban who will go back saying this is impacting our ability to govern, then we may see the ban not lifted. I don't think, unlikely that this ban on smartphones will be lifted, but we may see not an expansion of it. But otherwise, expansion is quite likely.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Shahrazad Akbar, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. Now, just to tell you more about the reason I'm here in New York, I've been speaking to Tucker Carlson, a one-time supporter of Donald Trump, who's turned his back on the president. That could prove a problem for the president. Tucker Carlson commands enormous online influence with millions of followers, many of them from Trump's side of politics. I asked him if he thinks the Iran war will be destructive to Trump's presidency. Just have a listen.
Of course it's the end. Of course it's the end. And I said this to him in February.
We're seeing a lot of the vice president now coming out, defending this deal. He said fundamentally it was worth it. That's what he said.
What was worth it? The deal?
The war, the deal, it was worth it.
Well, what are you going to say? It wasn't worth it. All these Americans died. It cost us tens, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars, and will cost more going forward. So, like, it's a tough pill to say it wasn't worth it. I mean, this was all pointless. Like, no one wants to hear that. No one wants to say that. No one wants to believe that.
That was Tucker Carlson, and you can watch more of my interview with Tucker Carlson throughout the week on Sky News platforms. We'll be showing it here on my program as well at 9 p.m. Tomorrow. But from me and the team from New York, goodbye for now.